Dr. Richard Lyons is the William and Janet Cronk Chair in Innovative Leadership and the Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer at the University of California, Berkeley. Previously, Rich served as the Dean of the UC Berkeley's Haas School from 2008 to 2018. For the 2 years just prior to serving as Dean, Lyons was the Chief Learning Officer at Goldman Sachs. He received his Bachelor of Science degree with the highest honors from UC Berkeley in finance and his Ph.D. from MIT in economics. Before joining the Berkeley faculty, Rich was for 6 years on the faculty at Columbia Business School. His research and teaching expertise is in international finance, and his top applied interest is the how and why of setting strong cultures in organizations. Rich, welcome to Trusted Peer Entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Philip.
In January of 2020, you became the Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer for the University of California, Berkeley. It is now more than 2 years since you assumed your role as Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer. Within the context of how to map the university's intellectual creativity into more societal benefit, what problem was Berkeley trying to solve when it created this new role for you?
Well, thanks for that question. I think one of the things that characterizes Berkeley, lots of universities, but especially Berkeley, is that it's a very distributed creativity kind of a place. Berkeley eschews centralization, I think more so than private research universities. So there was all this distributed creativity, lots of distributed capacity in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship. And the idea was, we don't want to centralize anything. My job isn't about centralization. My job is about intentionality, coordination, facilitation, where it makes sense, this kind of thing. And so I think that was really what drove it, that there was just so much wonderful stuff, but that does it add up? Could it add up to a little bit more than the sum of the parts?
And in terms of, how has the scope of your job evolved over the last 2 years? That is it innovation for the university, or is it facilitating innovation for student entrepreneurs and faculty researchers?
Well, there isn't so much space between those two things. I think, there are many, many wonderful staff that are also innovators. We have postdocs and other categories of people, human capital, as it were. But, the students and the faculty really are quite fundamental. So on the faculty side, it's not just about startups and entrepreneurship. It's their intellectual property, right? Many faculty, most all faculty, want their research, their intellectual creativity to have impact, right? So the tech transfer office reports through me, right? The licensing, the patenting, all that sort of thing. CRISPR, for example, this gene editing, profound transformation in our ability to affect the biology of the world, with attendant questions that come with that. But in any event, so I think it's for the university. It's a university-wide job, but I think the big focal points really are sort of faculty intellectual creativity, whether it's in startups or whether it's IP and getting licensed, intellectual property and getting licensed on the outside, but also students. How do we get more students? I'll frame it this way. How many of our students do we think should become founders of companies? Whatever somebody's answer to that might be, 5 or 10 or 15%. If we asked it differently and asked, how many of our students would benefit by thinking more entrepreneurially? Well, that many people would say 90% to that. So part of delivering to students isn't just, can we create more startups? It's sort of like, can we shape and develop our students in a different way that makes them more entrepreneurial, even if they're not going to found a company?
When I spoke with Ed Roberts at MIT, he shared that more than 50%, it may have even been higher, more than 50% of the Sloan School applicants at the business school, and also more than 60-70% of undergraduates applying to MIT had stated that they were looking to start a company before they graduated or just after they graduated. Is this sort of what a trend that you're seeing across all universities and especially at Berkeley for the students coming in?
Yeah, it is. I don't have the specific numbers to compare, but being part of Silicon Valley, obviously Berkeley naturally attracts an awful lot of students who are in the same mindset. And I think more broadly and societally, the gig economy, the idea of a side hustle, I think even this world of distributed work that was driven by COVID with all of its challenges, I think will also make people feel like, look, I can plug and play in a different way in the rest of my life. I think that too will contribute to people's entrepreneurial thinking and the idea that, starting something and keeping it going is something they have more degrees of freedom to do. So all of these things in my mind, including university commitment to stoking and providing support for all of this is leading in a secular direction of more.
A Berkeley norm is question the status quo. How does that guide what you were doing as CE and IO?
Thanks. That is a fundamental ethos at Berkeley. There are obviously great scholars and great people at every university, and so they are questioners of the status quo, or they wouldn't be great scholars. But when you think at the kind of university identity level, I won't mention any university by name, but take an elite university, an elite private university, and then question the status quo to it. Could you see the president of that university coming out tomorrow and saying, University X, we are all about questioning the status quo? It's sort of like that's a hard thing because that's just not their history and their identity and where they come from, right? And so I think that Berkeley, that's so woven into the fabric of the place, that so naturally attracts people that are oriented that way. It really does put an engine underneath this innovation and entrepreneurship. There are just a lot of people. It's like, I can make this better. There's got to be a better way to do this. That mindset is very powerful, and Berkeley has an awful lot of it.
So your position is new, or new over the last 2 years. It was created over the last 2 years. Do you think that every university should have a chief innovation and entrepreneurship officer?
What wonderful question. People sometimes joke and they say, look, any company or institution, university or otherwise, that needs a chief innovation officer is probably in trouble already, right? Right? The idea that it should be infused in everything you're doing, or you really don't get it, right? So there's that argument, but I think that's fallacious when it comes to a university. I think you're seeing it in more and more universities. My counterpart, several universities, Princeton launched a role that was very similar to mine right around the time Berkeley did, and so forth. So I think the idea again is, with all the advances that these great research universities have made in terms of their ecosystems, is there a greater level of intentionality? Can we, like, one of the words that's a mantra for us at Berkeley, it may be at other universities, is like, how can we take what we've done and build a platform out of it? Right? This is going on in engineering, that's going on in the business school, that's going on in the College of Natural Resources, whatever, right? It's sort of like, can we pull it together and make a platform, a basis for repeatable, scalable outcomes that the whole campus can understand, as opposed to, once you go down into this silo, you will see that they've got some interesting stuff going on. Well, that's actually an interesting opportunity. And I think it's exactly that kind of adding up to more than you used to add up to that is an opportunity at virtually all these campuses.
Talking about that, it is across disciplines and within a university, but then what about external to the university? How, and you're talking about a platform, does the platform include the ecosystem outside of a university as well?
Yes. And I think one of the ways to think about this is that there are many platforms, right? We actually have a one-pager at Berkeley. It's up on our website, but it's sort of like, here are 10 platforms that we're thinking about and working on. And again, it's sort of like, other universities could say we do that too. It's sort of like, no, but when you put the word platform on it, it changes people's expectations. I think it changes your pathway and your commitment to it. But part of it too is, how do we connect to the external world? So I'll give you a concrete example. One of the platforms that we built very recently, and there's an FAQ on our website, we call it the Berkeley Research Infrastructure Commons. the Berkeley RIC, RIC. And so what is the Berkeley RIC? In a nutshell, it takes the scientific instruments at a UC Berkeley and makes them available on the outside when they're unused. So think Sunday. I need a mass spectrometer, which is something you use to find out the elemental composition of anything, a soil, a material, and so forth. I could get access as a startup, for example, to a mass spectrometer or a DNA sequencer, or name your scientific instrument. There's a lot of underutilization of scientific instruments, and making those available to the outside to people. It's priced, it's fully priced. DocuSign click-through contract. So if you say it's not sounding like a platform yet, DocuSign click-through contract. It doesn't have to go through risk. What's the insurance here? Doesn't have to go through legal, doesn't have to go through business contracts and so forth. It's just sort of like, bang, I've got this for these 5 hours on a Sunday evening. I own all the IP, I'm the startup, right? And here's the fee. And it's like, wow. So when we think about ecosystems within universities, and I was saying all this distributed creativity, it's like we got this program and that accelerator and that incubator. It's like, that's all stuff that's inside the tent. This opens up the wall of the tent and makes us interact with the outside world in a fundamentally different way. It's sort of like, I mean, it's kind of like the transformation that I think AWS was first, when Amazon Web Services basically said, you startup founder, you don't have to buy a server anymore. Use our server, change that big fixed cost that you didn't know how you were going to get the money for, and change it into a variable cost. You can buy an hour of processing time or a day or whatever you need. Sort of like that allows lean entrepreneurship to happen, right? It's sort of like, now I can run experiments at much lower cost. I don't have to expend these big fixed costs. All right, same kind of thing for scientific instruments. Berkeley was doing a bit of that before, so was every other university. Mm-hmm. And MP3s existed when Apple created the iTunes Store, right? Mm-hmm. MP3s are not a platform. The Apple iTunes Store is amazing. So that's again, if somebody says, yeah, we do some of that. So like, no, we're talking about a platform where people can really use this. And anyway, so that's one of the things that you take some of this activity that's going on and you get a vision for something much bigger and bolder. And we think it's something that will diffuse around the country.
So what is the benefit that accrues to Berkeley by my using, the spectrometer, mass spectrometer, for a fee, right? It's besides the fee.
Well, yeah, besides the fee, but I just want to let me come back to the fee, and then I'll answer your question But I was talking to I won't mention which one, but one of our lab directors. By the way, 20 of our lab directors have already put their labs on this platform. So if no lab directors want to play, there's no supply side, there's no platform, but it's taking off. All right, one of the lab directors, when I first mentioned this idea, he said, "Hey, in fact, we need this machine." I can't remember what it was, some cell sequencer or something like that. He said, we couldn't afford one. We couldn't figure out how to make the economics work. With this program, we can make the economics work. We can buy one of those. So this is not just about machines that are sitting there idle. This is about having more research capacity at Berkeley, right? Stuff that you couldn't afford to buy. So I think that's an important insight, right? It's not just kind of like, oh, now we have some money. Let's go have a party. All right. But I think the other way to think about this is, first of all, these companies that are using these platforms, they will connect to our faculty in new ways. They will connect to our researchers, our research programs in different ways. We have Berkeley Artificial Intelligence Research Lab. This is one of the areas where we're going to have greater connectivity. So, we think for a lot of these startups, we've got a lot of students that are willing to work at startups for no pay for development opportunities. We have something called at Berkeley, the ACE program, ACE, Accelerating Careers in Entrepreneurship. And this is a program that matches students, undergraduates, for mostly with no compensation, with developmental internship opportunities with startups. So the startups that are using these facilities, we've got a whole bundle of things we can connect them to. And many of these things are going to help develop our students, develop our faculty research, and do other things. So it's not just about the money.
So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but, one of the things that you had talked about in another venue was the permeability of a university. Mm. What do you mean by that? I mean, you were just talking about it, yes, but extend that for, the near future, the next 4 or 5 years? What does that mean for the university, this permeability?
Yeah, so you could also think about it as sort of accessibility or interoperability, are phrases that could apply. So one way to think about it is for people who think more deeply about organizations than I do. Oliver Williamson is one of my colleagues. He sadly passed away, but he won the Nobel Prize, and he won the Nobel Prize in economics because basically for what is the boundary of the organization? Why is certain economic activity taking place inside an economic entity, a company, or could be a public sector entity? And why is some outside, right? Mediated by markets. Okay, so some activity is inside an organization, some between organizations. And the fundamental insight there is that there are economic forces that help you understand why it's better to do some stuff inside versus outside. All right, but the whole idea is that there's a boundary, there's an edge. And I think historically, it's sort of like what happens inside Berkeley, especially as a public institution, it's sort of like, it's a bright line. It's a very bright line, what we do inside and what's not inside. And there are lots of things we have to continue to be careful about, right? There are conflict of interest issues and other sorts of things where it's like, wait a minute, that's not mission advancing. That shouldn't be inside whatever the line is. But I think one of the ways, I'll give you a concrete example. We just launched an incubator called the Baker Bioingenuity Hub. This is Berkeley-owned space. It's not a 501c3. It's not WeWork, whatever. It's Berkeley-owned space. It's right across the street from the main campus. There are 50 startups in there, and it's lab space. They're doing research. They're doing translational research. And the startups that are in there are leasing these facilities from Berkeley. They own all the IP. And so it's like an IP safe zone, right? Most every other lab on Berkeley campus, there's some slight exceptions, but the idea is any IP that gets created in that lab, the University of California Regents own the IP, okay? Berkeley owns the IP, period. So it's sort of like an IP safe zone. So this is, is that inside the university or outside the university? It's sort of like it's in that blurring interaction space. Now, is this in conflict with the mission of the university? It's like, look, we got it. We're not in the business. We're not a commercial entity. The idea that we're leasing space and making a bunch of money, it's like, if that's all we're doing, I agree, we shouldn't be doing it. But that's not all we're doing at the Baker Bioingenuity Hub. Again, undergraduates are getting connected to these startups. They're getting developmental opportunities. Our postdocs, our graduate students, our faculty are getting connected in interesting ways. So look, the idea is if you keep it mission advancing, which is an absolute necessary condition, and you start sort of blurring those boundaries, we think we can have more impact. We can contribute more to society as UC Berkeley by managing the blurriness at the boundary.
Well, the tech transfer office is taking IP that is developed within the university, right? And so what you're introducing is saying, gee, we can bring some outside or create some external IP that benefits society. Am I reading that right?
I think you are, but I would add a slight nuance there, because some of the startups in the Baker Bioingenuity Hub are UC Berkeley faculty.
Okay.
So they have licensed, the companies that they've set up have licensed their own IP. So UC is getting paid for that IP, but a faculty member has a way to do stuff outside of his or her lab on campus that is advancing what they've already licensed, and creating a space for them to, or their graduate students or their postdocs or whatever. It doesn't mean the faculty member is actually running the company. But the idea is let's sort of lubricate the path from faculty IP to startup in a way that makes it easier for faculty. So yes, some of the companies that are in this Baker Bioingenuity Hub have no affiliation with Berkeley, and it's kind of and are not licensed, including no licensing of Berkeley IP. But they bring IP and knowledge, and they're doing lab research, translational research, that we can plug our undergraduates into and our graduate students and so forth, right? So it's kind of like, I think the proximity of having those sort of outside companies connected to Berkeley and connected to mission advancing activity like developing our students is a benefit.
So a lot of universities are familiar with the NSF I-Corps program, okay? And I believe that you're a primary investigator.
We are.
And so you are. And so how is that different or similar? Does that undermine what the NSF is funding when Berkeley is providing all of these other opportunities? How do you view all of that?
Yeah, I think in my mind, I'm not just saying this, they feel fully complementary to me because they're really sort of aiming at different things. So sticking with this Baker Bioingenuity Hub, because I've described it, there's obviously a lot of stuff going on at Berkeley, not just that, but that's new. It's a shiny object. It's a big deal, right, for us. And I think it's unique in the country at its scale and what it's doing. So the NSF I-Corps, I'm boiling it down. There's a lot that goes on in this innovation core, the so-called I-Corps. But one of the things that they do at I-Corps is they will take an intact team. So they will take a faculty member who's doing hardcore research, and they have to apply to these things. But the idea is the faculty member and maybe a postdoc or two from their lab and maybe a graduate student or two. So like an intact team. So it's not just send a faculty member to a course. No, it's an intact team goes through a program where most of the focus is on what they, in a jargon, they call customer discovery. It's sort of like how might this science get used downstream? What does that look like, right? So this isn't about doing translational science per se. This is really just about developing a line of sight as a scientist for how things might get used downstream. And how does that customer discovery process work? Basically, it's, Steve Blank and Eric Rees and these other people, it's like, get out of the building. So part of the I-Corps program is go talk to some of the people. Look, if it's healthcare, is it sort of like, who's the buyer? Who's the decision maker? Is it a doctor? Is it a patient? Is it an insurance company? Is it a hospital? I mean, these different entities are solving such totally different problems that if you think, oh, somebody out there will want it, it's like, no, you need to know who will want it and under what conditions and what kind of science, what kind of translational hypotheses you still need to resolve before you can actually deliver value to the person that's most likely to buy it. Now, most scientists, it's like never have thought about it that way, right? They've just never really thought about what does the need look like on the ground and how do I go from the science that I've just patented to needs on the ground. And again, doesn't mean the NSF is trying to create founder entrepreneurs from all of our great scientists. They just want to make sure the scientists understand it. Okay, now back to Baker Bioingenuity Hub. It's like you've gone through one of those programs. Now it's sort of like, I think we've got something here. I think we've got something here that's going to work downstream. But here are 2 or 3 scientific elements that we still need to resolve before we think we could actually, like if it's a new food, a bioengineered food or something along those lines. It's like, yeah, I can produce it in a test tube. Can I produce it in 1,000-gallon vats and so forth? That's a totally different question. And some of those types of questions need to be resolved before you know whether you have something that's commercially viable. So, the customer discovery, open the mind to what might constitute a successful business, and then provide kind of the translational research capacity for people to resolve the scientific questions that they need in order to connect those dots.
Entrepreneurship educators have traditionally been on the fringe. Now they are at the center where the attractiveness of entrepreneurship is recognized. Are universities in danger of becoming one big entrepreneurship center?
Well, so I want to go back to something I said earlier. If somebody said, what percentage of our students should become founders? And people will have a different view on that. But suppose you say 10%, 15, whatever. And what percentage of our students would benefit from thinking more entrepreneurially? Well, those are, and so it's really the second question and the answer to the second question where it's sort of like, this is a good thing, right? We're not telling everybody they need to be a founder. You're not worth anything if you're not a founder, but it's sort of like, look, we're all entrepreneurs now. I mean, look, I need to manage my human capital like an entrepreneur. I need to think about where is my opportunity going to be larger, depending upon whether I take this course or that course, or I get this degree or that degree. Now, most of my professional life is behind me. But for a lot of people, it's sort of like that's the way entrepreneurs think. It's like opportunity recognition in the jargon, right? It's sort of like, where is the opportunity and how do I position myself to take advantage of it? It's like, that's a good mindset because you could be thinking about, I'm just interested in the public sector, I'm interested in policy. It's like, great, same question. Where is my opportunity in the public sector and how do I position myself to take advantage of it? Same phrase. Or a social sector, it's like, I'm interested in creating an NGO. I'm not interested in creating a tech company. Same question. Where is my opportunity? And how do I position myself to go after it? So, the idea that we're just producing a bunch of commercial people is like, that is way too narrow. It's like our humanists are going to benefit, in my judgment, by thinking more entrepreneurially, no matter what they want to go into. And so, look, it's never going to take over the disciplines. It's never going to be, it's like, don't do physics, don't do chemistry, don't do economics. But I think of it as an add-on. It's sort of like, if you were going to do it's not a minor, but if you thought about it, it's like, this is a minor that everybody should do. I kind of think about it, everybody's too strong a word, but this cognition process, this way of orienting yourself in the world is going to be valuable for a very wide cross section of our students.
In my interview with Errol Arkalich, I asked him, what is the single most important course a university can take, and the course that should be a core course for all? He replied that a course on the scientific method should be a core course for all university students. Now, the first bucket of content for the Berkeley Changemaker course is critical thinking. All right.
Yeah.
So how are the scientific method and critical thinking, how are they similar? How are they different? And, sort of in the educational jargon, compare and contrast.
Yeah, well, it's a fun question, and they're both such big concepts. So, and different people have different orientations. Let me just tell a quick story, and then I promise I'll answer your question. But I'm an economist. I'm trained to think in a particular way, and I was talking about critical thinking with one of our faculty members, and we built this curriculum. We can talk about it, called Berkeley Changemaker, and as you mentioned, one of the pillars is critical thinking. And so I'm speaking to a woman who theater, dance, and performance studies. That she's a faculty member in that area, right? So she's arts and humanities 100%. And we're talking about critical thinking because she was going to help us teach one of these courses. And she said to me on the phone, faculty member to faculty member, designing a course, hey, do you understand how important empathy is to critical thinking? My brain almost exploded. It's sort of like, I think about rational actors, right? Economics assumes we don't believe people are perfectly rational, but we often assume that, and our models are supposed to describe how the world works. The idea that empathy is an important way to think about cognition sort of like kind of didn't compute for me, but as she was saying, look, how can you look at an issue from all sides? I mean, really see it from all sides if you don't understand how other people are seeing it? And empathizing with, right? Sort of like, as soon as somebody says that, it's like, wow, kind of obviously true the way you said that. All right. So these words can mean such very different things to different people. And we're taking a pretty big view in the Berkeley Changemaker curriculum on what critical thinking looks like. I heard the phrase the other day, critical reflection. I love that phrase. So anyways, real quickly, critical thinking, oversimplifying, this is kind of my old definition, but it's like asking the right questions. It's really about questioning. It's a questioning mind. But well, if that's true, but what about this? And these two things don't add up. And right. So it's constantly kind of asking the next question and doing that in a purposeful, coherent way. Loosely speaking, scientific method is in my view is as used by most people is a very specific thing. It's sort of like, have you formed a hypothesis? I remember in the working world, somebody said, I was new to a job, doesn't matter which job. but somebody said to me, you know, we were talking about my new job and what my emerging thoughts, right? And it was in a business. And this person said, what are your hypotheses? I loved the phrase. That's a very scientific method question, right? It's sort of like you're seeing some data, you have some general hypotheses, you formulate those hypotheses, then you bring them to the data, or you test them, or you create an experiment. It depends upon what field. Scientific, I'm a social scientist, so I think about it a little bit more. But it's really going from hypothesis to test to advancing knowledge, right? And that's a pretty specific thing. Whereas critical thinking is a bigger category in my mind.
So we mentioned Berkeley Changemaker, and this is it's unique, certainly at Berkeley. I think to the extent that you've trademarked it, but so should, you know, what is Changemaker, and then the second sort of more important question is, should a Changemaker like course be required of all university students?
Well, let me say a few words. I'll take those in the order you posed them. So the word changemaker is used elsewhere. It's not like Berkeley is the first to use that term, right? But you put the word Berkeley in front of the word changemaker. And again, we were talking about questioning the status quo and things that Berkeley represents, right? You could put a lot of university names in front of the word changemaker and think, oh, not really. Okay, not where they come from. I won't disrespect any university, but try that thought experiment, right? And you know, on the science side, you might say, yeah, University X changemaker. Science, yeah. How about social? How about society? Are they change making in kind of a societal or social sense? And so, okay, so Berkeley changemaker, and we put a real definition to it. It's like every single course that is coded in the curriculum at Berkeley under Berkeley Changemaker has 3 pillars in it: critical thinking, communication, and collaboration, right? Every single one. So if somebody says, yeah, it's just kind of, it's a buzz phrase. It's like, not at Berkeley. We've operationalized it very specifically, all right? Now you could ask, well, how do you teach critical thinking and what is communication? So, okay, but the structure is there. And I think that's really fundamental when people ask, well, what is it really about? I mean, give me kind of the one word or shorter phrase version of it. I'd say it's about agency. It's about agency. It's about sort of feeling like you can have an impact in the world, and that you have a toolkit for having impact in the world, and that you're enabled in exactly that way. So part of it, you know, I said critical thinking, communication, collaboration. Yeah, it's about that. But if somebody pushed me even further, I'd say, look, you can't be what you can't see. And it's true of all of us. And there are a lot of 18, 20, 25-year-olds who can't see a lot of futures that are in fact available to them, but they can't see them yet. And part of our job is identity making. It's helping them see those identities so that they become feasible, so that they actually think, maybe me, that maybe that's available to me, as opposed to thinking they do that. No, I do that, or at least that's available to me. So that's part of what I mean by agency. It's sort of this idea of, look, I am less constrained than I thought I was. And I think that's when you ask somebody after they graduate from a university versus before, sort of like, do you feel more confident? Everyone will say yes. But it's not just the knowledge. I would argue that part of that is the identities that are made, the potential identities that are available to them when they graduate. And so going back to your latter question, should it be required? At Berkeley, nothing should be required. It's just kind of the way we operate, right? You got to give people choice. But we think everybody would benefit. I'll go out on a limb there. I think everybody, if we're delivering this, and so just so you have a sense, the first time we offered the Gateway Front End Berkeley Changemaker course, we offered it in a summer, and 500 incoming freshmen took the course. With no history of the course, 500 incoming students said, that resonates for me. That hits me right here. That's where I want to go, right? And in 2 years, we only launched it 2 years ago, 15% of all Berkeley undergraduates have taken a Berkeley Changemaker course. And we're building a minor, so we've only started.
Hmm.
So I think we're aiming for, in steady state, for at least 50% of Berkeley undergraduates graduating having taken a Berkeley Changemaker course. And we'd like to be the biggest minor on campus within 5 years. Those are very bold statements, but that's the kind of headroom we see in the narrative.
I'll put a tickler in my calendar to come back to you in 5 years.
Good. I'm glad you'll hold me to it.
um, how important are the terms that we use for innovation and entrepreneurship in motivating and including students across all disciplines to lead lives of agency?
Well,
Okay.
yep. No, it's a great, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's a follow. I'll give you the follow-on question.
Right.
And what changes can be made to develop more curricula of the kinds that students really want and promotes inclusivity in I&E across the disciplines?
Yeah.
So they're both about the same question.
Yeah. Well, look, it's a fundamental question. When we think about access and inclusivity, and, just a very quick story. Frida Kapoor Klein, you may know her, but anyways, I remember there was a company coming out of Berkeley, a social entrepreneurship company. And I sent her an email and said, hey, this is a really cool company. But the question she said is, Rich, is it disparity reducing? That's what we do. Is it disparity reducing? Like you could say ESG, social impact, there are lots, right? That's what she's going after, disparity reduction. And so I think part of what we are trying to, yes, make it more inclusive. So one way to think about Berkeley Changemaker is we wanted to come up with a wider, more inclusive vision for teaching entrepreneurship at Berkeley. And the way we did that was build Berkeley Changemaker. Now, that's not the only reason why we built Berkeley Changemaker, but I think that is a helpful way of framing why we did what we did. Because to go back to the beginning of your question, look, let's be honest, words like founder, entrepreneur, startup, innovator, venture capitalist, these are not very inclusive words. They're just a lot of 18-year-olds, a lot of 20-year-olds that think they do that. Other people do that. That I don't do that, or that's not available to me, or it's not really accessible. Lots and lots. Whereas change-making, we are finding that a lot more students are able to connect to that. And in fact, if you look at sort of the student makeup, the mix of students who take an entrepreneurship class labeled as entrepreneurship versus who take a change-making class, a Berkeley Changemaker class, so people of color are taking our courses into a much greater degree than Berkeley on average. Mm-hmm. Women are taking our courses to a greater degree than Berkeley on average. Neither of those two facts would be true if you're just thinking about an entrepreneurship class. So I'm not saying we've solved this, but I think we have to find handles and words and nomenclature that allow people to see themselves in what we're doing. And traditional entrepreneurship classes, they certainly tried and made efforts. We feel like this different approach is delivering more on that front.
Is it time to retire the word entrepreneurship?
Well, I still like it, but I think, at least for me, entrepreneurial as an adjective.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like entrepreneur is like a person, it's a persona, it's a pretty narrow thing. Right. Because, for example, there are a lot of students where it's like, I don't want to be the first employee of a company. I want to be in the 10 to 20 range. That's still all the excitement of a startup, but you're not the founder or the co-founders. But that's a terrifically different world than going to a Fortune 500 company, right? So if people are basically saying, I'm not an entrepreneur, so I'm going to go to a Fortune 500 company, it's like, you don't have to be the founder to have a lot of fun for the next 10 years in a small company, a brand new company, right, as a relatively early employee. So it feels like entrepreneur and entrepreneurship are de facto pretty darn narrow categories in people's minds. And that's why the idea of entrepreneurial thinking, how do we get people to widen that category and then maybe go even wider to things like change making?
I'm going to shift a little bit here and go back in time. From 2006 to 2008, Rich, you took leave from Berkeley to serve as Goldman Sachs Chief Learning Officer, focusing on leadership development for managing directors. What did you carry back to academia from your Goldman Sachs experience? And should a university become more intentional about shaping its culture?
Yeah, well, you kind of answered your question in the latter part of the question, but it is exactly my answer to that question. So, any bank and Goldman Sachs included is not UC Berkeley, and we have a different mission and totally different perspective on things, and that's how it should be, right? So it was a very different work context for me. All of that said, you go into a work context like that, and I was overseeing, their learning and development function, right? The teaching and the courses and things like that. And so part of what I did see though is, what does intentionality around culture look like? So when we're talking about organizations or institutions or businesses, you're talking about what are the behavioral norms? What are sort of the agreed upon ways of acting in this company? And every company, every organization, right? Including, universities, including governments, and all organizations have cultures, whether you like it or not, by which I mean, again, a set of behavioral norms that people often aren't even conscious of, but abide by in the way they behave. All right. So then the question was, look, the Goldman Sachs is and so are other companies, super intentional about its culture. I mean, it's like, what are the levers? How do you use them? How do you, in the jargon, how do you onboard people? What are the first 5 experiences people have at Goldman Sachs, right? How do you think about interviewing them? What is this person going to be comfortable in this culture? You don't want to hire somebody that's not going to be able to acculturate and some of these kinds of things. All right. So that intentionality that I got to see, like, from the front row seat, because I was I was on something called the operating committee, which is like the senior most team in the HR division. They didn't call it HR; they call it human capital management. But so what bonuses get paid when people transgress, what happens to them, and all that. So I got to see all of that, including the engine room of culture management. Eye-opening for me, scales falling from my eye. I'm an economist. Economists don't write and think about culture, right? The scholars in the business school that write about organizational culture, they're social psychologists, or they're sociologists, or they're psychologists, but they're not economists. Only recently have economists started writing about culture. Anyways, so long story short, I see this. Then I come back to Berkeley, and it's like, huh. So I'm brand new dean. It's 2008. I've just left Goldman Sachs, this experience. I'm the dean. I left Goldman Sachs to come back to be dean. And I go on the website for the Haas School, Berkeley Haas, and I start searching on core values, culture, principles. Nothing's been codified. Now, the Haas School, like every other business school or every other academic institution, it has a culture. Every organization does, but it had never been codified. And so then the question is, could we take a stand on culture? Could we take a stand on values? Could we take a stand on values that isn't the same darn words that everybody is using? Because that's like cringe. Really? You're going to come out and say, we're about excellence too. It's like, not to take away from excellence, but it's sort of like, gag me, right? So that's when we started talking about things like question the status quo. Again, how many top business schools are you going to hear a dean come out and say, we're about questioning the status quo? Another one was confidence without attitude. There are a lot of great business people who are not well described by confidence without attitude. They should go to another business school. Nobody was talking like that in our industry, right? And I think if you also ask presidents, just taking it up to the university level, if you ask most presidents, look, are you in the values business? Most of them would hesitate to answer. They wouldn't know what to say. If you said, are you in the character business? They say, absolutely, we do that. So there's quite a space between those two questions. In my kind of simplistic overview description, it's like, I come from an industry, education, where intentionality around culture really wasn't there. Not the way it is in lots of other types of institutions. And it felt like a huge opportunity to be more intentional about behavioral norms, culture, and values within business schools, and say something that other people aren't saying. Take a stand so people know where you stand, and take a stand that's different and that is meaningful. And so anyways, so long answer, but that's sort of what, literally, there's no way I would have gone there if I hadn't had that experience outside of the university.
So I'm going to connect some dots here, and maybe incorrectly, but at Berkeley, you have attracted 8 of the 10 largest gifts in school history. Why is a strong narrative an essential element of fundraising success? And is this narrative, I mean, how does that tie into, the 4 defining values of, let's say, the Haas School?
Yeah, thanks. So
and what you brought back from Goldman Sachs as well.
Yeah, so you used that in the present tense. When I stepped down from dean, that was true. Ann Harrison, the current dean, has brought in some big gifts. So I don't even quite know what the league table looks like right now. But look more seriously, I think, look, whether you're you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to get funding, right? One of the classic definitions, as you know so well, Philip, of an entrepreneur is this is somebody who gets stuff done using resources they don't control. Mm-hmm. Give me your money, give me your time, give me, your intellectual property, give me, I need all these things. I promise you we'll paint a really nice picture. Sort of like a lot of people have to buy it before you're going to have any feasible course of action, right? And that's the way entrepreneurship is. And so I view fundraising very, very similarly, right? It's sort of like, paint me a picture. I need you to describe a future state at the business school, something I can invest in as a philanthropist that feels important to me, meaningful to me, achievable, sort of, it becomes actionable by the amount of money you're asking me for. But it's very, very similar to being an entrepreneur and trying to get funding. I mean, at the end of the day, look, when I was an undergrad, I said, I'm not going into sales. I'm a thinker guy. I'm an idea guy. That's sales. I'm not going into sales. The last 20 years of my life, sales. I mean, in the positive sense, that is like, do you have an idea? Do you have a story? Tell the story. How sharp is it? How do you get people to follow? And when you are selling something you care deeply about, like a university or, a business school, in my case as a dean, it shows. And people think, okay, if you're really going to go for this, I'm going to be behind you. And so, that's true in every politicians, it's public sector, the civic sector. You're trying to start a nonprofit or you're trying to start an NGO, you better be painting a pretty clear picture and show some intentionality around it. So, this feels universal to me.
Mm-hmm. It's living a life of agency requires you to stand up and express your ideas, sell your ideas. Entrepreneurs are familiar with the concept of a pitch deck and the pitch, right? How can a university incorporate the concepts of a pitch deck and the investor pitch for non-business, humanities-based disciplines? I mean, this is talking again about terms, using changemaker versus entrepreneurship and that sort of thing. But these are really kind of important fundamental skills.
Yes, couldn't agree more. And just the word pitch says things to people where it's sort of like, well, don't use the word pitch when you answer his question. But let me reframe it slightly, and I would reframe it with the word story.
Okay.
Right. I mean, in fact, the crucible, the owners of story are humanists on campus. I mean, it's what they do. If anybody does that well, they do, right? What is a narrative? I mean, I've had humanists say, Rich, you keep using the word narrative. You're not really talking about a narrative, not the way I understand it, right? And they're 3 levels deeper than I am, and I respect that. So if instead of pitch, it's sort of like, do you understand? Remember I said earlier, speak into the listening of the person you're speaking to. What problem are they trying to solve? start with what problem they're trying to solve so that you can tailor your message and your story and the outcome you're trying to achieve to overlap as much as possible with what problem they're trying to solve. If you are just blasting them with your problem, there's going to be no connect there. All right. So I think that's part of the idea of story. Can you tell a story where people say, I get that, I can remember that? That's so part of painting a picture, I think, especially for the humanists and the social scientists, is about storytelling. So I think, speaking into the listening of the humanist, it's sort of like your pitch deck, if I may use that term, should load heavily on things you are great at, and narrative and story, superpower for you. So lean into that. I'll give you a concrete example. I don't want to give away too much personal information, but this is a founder from the Haas School, went through our executive MBA program, and he founded a company that was very, very successful. I won't tell you which company, but he was pitching people. He's got a Ph.D. in biological sciences. He just got his MBA. He's got this company. It's okay. So he's pitching, trying to get money. And he told me this story years later. And then at one of the pitches with one of the VCs, he said, my wife had preeclampsia. I've been through this. I know what this feels like. That venture capitalist said, start every pitch with that. Every pitch, hit them right here. Because that's what's going to communicate just how committed you are, right? And he was like not wanting to tell the personal story. It's sort of like it's business, like boom. So that's kind of that's the story part of it. It's like pull out the emotion, get people connected at that larger level. And our humanists are just great at that.
It wouldn't be an interview unless I mentioned COVID in some way. So COVID, I think we can all agree, was a forced experiment to get universities to focus on the questions of what is it about the on-campus experience that is special, right?
Yeah.
And it's, I'm using your words, but it's what do you see is the convening power of universities?
And another giant question, a wonderful question. I at the end of the day, that mixing among students, and those chance encounters with a faculty member where something gets said that wouldn't have otherwise been said, and it becomes a powerful question or a completely animating perspective on things. Those are often the things that really change us most fundamentally. So that, that's been understood a lot, but it's kind of that co-curriculum part, right? It's not the narrow curriculum in the classroom. It's all this co-curricular mixing and interaction, and a lot of it serendipitous that is so fundamental. I think though, when you think about what part of what we hopefully do well goes back to something I said earlier, and it's this idea that you can't be what you can't see, and how do we help people see pathways, see things in themselves, identities in themselves that they couldn't see before. And I think that's part of the magic of a super fruitful educational opportunity, and it's pretty hard to do that remotely. Now you can do remote coaching and remote advising, but part of what helps somebody see something in themselves is like a very personal interaction where you're willing to kind of reveal something on both sides. And a lot of people in an electronically mediated interaction, they don't always get to that deeper level. So that's just one element of why I think the in-person, the convening power is so important. One other thing I'll mention on this, because I think it's related. I think this distributed work environment that we're not going to go back to the way we worked in the past. We might go 10 or 20% of the way back, or 30, but we're not going 100% of the way back, working in offices and so forth. And I think that will actually contribute quite a bit to people's entrepreneurial mindset. All of a sudden, it's sort of like, wow, I could be in front of any company's screen right now, right? I could sort of work at any company. I'm not geographically, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people work where they do. It's sort of like, I don't have to commute. But if you sort of said, you don't have to commute, it's like, well, there are 20 other places I might want to work. And then, you know, people start adjusting. All right, how do I position myself to work in different ways, or how do I become, you know, a little bit more entrepreneurial in what I'm doing? So I think that one of the de facto outcomes of more distributed work is going to be a mindset for an awful lot of people.
Last question, Rich. Berkeley has, in many areas, 10x the resources and 10x the number of students as most private institutions or other public universities. What can other universities learn and implement from Berkeley in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation programs, culture, and agency?
Well, it's a super question. I think one of the things that we have done, it's up on our website, but we did a time lapse. What did Berkeley's innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem look like in the year 2000? What did it look like in 05, 2010, 2015, 2020? And it surprised, you might think that, oh, I'll bet you kind of knew what was on. No, it surprised everybody, including me. And it's just, there's so much delta there. Now, that's not an answer to your question, but if you actually looked at what's on that sheet in 2020, sort of like there are a bunch of things that at smaller scale or smaller budgets just aren't feasible. But there are a bunch of icons and things that are on that sheet that aren't that expensive. And, you know, like even something like, look, if you're doing curriculum evolution and development already, right? Thinking about a wider, more inclusive vision for teaching entrepreneurship, which is kind of where we started on Berkeley Changemaker. That's the kind of exercise that, like, look, you're doing that anyways. So put that as a goal in the discussion that you and your faculty are having, and that need not cost a lot of money. Another example, I think, you know, the idea of culture. So here, maybe I'll conclude with this because I know we're running out of time. We talked about culture earlier, and the Haas's four, we call them defining leadership principles, but the Haas has these 4 principles. We ask students who come to Haas, if you had to pick one reason and you only get one, why you chose Berkeley, why you chose Haas, what would it be? The third most cited reason, geography. I wanted to be in Silicon Valley. I want to get my MBA here, okay? The second most cited reason, ranking/reputation. We didn't separate those two things, but they had about the same number of citations. The most cited reason, with 3 times as many cites as either of those other two, culture, defining principles. Students are coming because it's like, that felt like a separator. It just, again, it got me right here. Confidence without attitude, beyond yourself, question the status quo. These are things that this is the way. And I didn't feel that same thing at other schools. All right. Why am I telling you this story? Because we also, while I was dean, we built a building and it cost us roughly $70 million. That is a tangible asset if there ever was one. At cost, it's worth 70. I'd like to think we did something with it that was worth more than 70, but it was philanthropically funded, $70 million asset. How many people do you think choose Haas because of that building? Maybe a few. Maybe a few say, oh, it means there's wind in the sails and the alumni are behind them, and that's a cool building. But it's one of 4 buildings. It's not our only building. All right. How many choose Haas because of the culture? That's a profoundly intangible asset. Which is the more valuable asset? One of them cost 70 million. The other cost a lot less. That doesn't mean, the staff time and other things that went into building the culture. So it's sort of like, if you asked me to give up one or the other, I may well give up the building. And so anyways, so the idea is there's some stuff that's very valuable that isn't that expensive. And there's some stuff that's very expensive. But separating the two leaves a lot in the not so expensive, potentially very valuable column.
Rich, thank you so very much. This has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to actually rereading the transcript.
Thank you, Philip. I enjoyed it.